And it's my pleasure to introduce Margaret Gould Stewart. When we started organizing this conference, we knew that one of our major tasks was to try and find somebody who would represent the spectrum of the people that are going to be here. And we decided that it was appropriate for the opening plenary to choose somebody who has been in the field for a decent amount of time as a practitioner and a designer in particular, because that's one aspect about this conference that we really wanted to highlight. Margaret Gould Stewart has most recently been the user experience designer, the lead at YouTube, where she has led the overall design look and feel and the direction of the user research at the company. Before that, she spent 2 years as the lead on search and consumer UX products at Google. And she has actually been a practitioner in this area for well over 15 years. Before she started her long career, she actually was a consultant in New York for very well-known companies like New York Times. And then after that, she actually led a number of efforts in startups that were eventually acquired in the first dot-com bubble, particularly a couple of companies like Tripod.com that was eventually part of Lycos. And one of the notable things about her is that she's actually managed to lead the design at 5 out of the top 10 most trafficked websites in the entire world. So as a designer, as you can see, obviously she has a lot of credibility to talk about what it is to really lead an effort to push the design field forward. So without further ado, let us welcome Margaret Gould Stewart.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I want to start out with a little language lesson, especially for those of you who may not have spent time in the South, or maybe you're from outside the United States. I want you to repeat after me. Good morning, y'all. How many of you have never heard the term y'all before? It's spelled Y''ALL. It's like a beautiful, very efficient way to say all of you people. So y'all, you can use that, repeat that after me, y'all. If you use that in drinking institutions or food institutions here in Austin, you will in fact get better service. So that's I didn't bring my cowboy hat, so that's my gift to you. Video. It's an evocative medium. It's able to combine pictures, sound, music, words, movement. It's almost hypnotic. And it's an extraordinarily effective storytelling device. Humans have always been storytellers. And our stories used to be passed on by word of mouth from generation to generation, repeated over and over again until they evolved into myths and legends, and they integrated themselves into the fabric of the big story of humankind. But the way we tell stories is changing, and the people who tell them is changing. And the way we tell stories together, instead of a single voice, it's a chorus of hundreds, thousands, millions, even billions of voices. And the speed with which these stories are changing our culture is rapidly accelerating. And in the case of YouTube, it's resulted in the largest and most diverse collection of human faces and voices ever seen in the world. And there are other examples of massive communal platforms that have disrupted the way that we think, the way we work, the way we entertain, and even the way that we see ourselves. We're no longer passive consumers, but we're what Dan Gilmore, author of We the Media, calls the former audience. We make things, we tell stories, we curate, we create. Now, when I first started writing this talk, I thought I was going to focus on the story of how video is connecting people around the world. It's a really interesting story. But as I got deeper into it, I realized that this story is actually much bigger than that. It's not just the story of connecting the world. It's about fundamentally changing it through experience design. Now, I speak in a lot of contexts to lots of different kinds of audiences, but today I'm especially proud and excited to speak with all of you because I feel as though I'm among like-minded colleagues and friends. And that's because while I consider myself to be a designer and a design leader, I first and foremost think of myself as a humanist. And I imagine that that's true for many of you as well. Humanism is defined as a concern for the needs, well-being, and interests of people. Doesn't that sound like a pretty good description of what we do? Now, my calling and that of all human-centered designers and researchers is to lift people up, to help them understand themselves and their environment, and to live their lives in the fullest way possible. Now, at some point in my career, I recognized a theme in the jobs and projects that I gravitated towards, and also the products that capture my imagination and my admiration. And that theme is to empower the creativity of others. Now, all these products that I've worked on and the ones that I love to use are ones that harness the collective creativity of massive communities and facilitate connections between people to create magical experiences. I want to be a part of creating things that make people feel smarter, more creative, more connected to their world. Now, YouTube is all about video, but it's YouTube, the video creator community, not YouTube, the company, that's the driving force behind the site's remarkable growth and the change that it is unleashing on the world. Last year, YouTube collaborated with Academy Award-winning director Kevin McDonald on a filmmaking experiment. We invited the world to shoot Kevin's film all about one day of life on Earth. Take a look.
Good morning, everyone.
Hola.
I don't like all such fun.
I really love my family.
I love football.
Do you both promise to love and treasure each other?
We do.
I'm afraid of losing this place.
I fear
Any kind of monster?
dogs. Growing up.
Politics scares me more than anything.
Stay safe.
When I close my eyes, I can see all different people in the world. I can feel it, I can touch it, I can see it.
Best day ever.
I've seen that trailer like 100 times and I still get weepy when I watch it. Now, how is it that thousands of people, most of whom have no formal training, were inspired to participate in this filmmaking experiment? And how is it that a remarkable, cohesive work emerges from their individual submissions? A huge part of it has to do with the way that YouTube has invited the world to tell their stories and tells them emphatically that you matter, that your story is important, and that we'll help it be heard. I've learned a lot over the years of working on sites like YouTube, and I've developed some opinions about how and why these platforms have the growth and impact that they do, and what it means for us as design practitioners. And to be clear, when I use the term design, I mean that in the big D sense, including all aspects of the design process, including discovery and evaluative research, information architecture, interaction, and visual design, and everything in between. As it turns out, it takes a village, especially when you're working on products as big and complicated as something like YouTube. But how big is it really? And sometimes even people in our own industry are surprised by the size and complexity of large platforms like YouTube. There's over 4 billion views, video views every day on the site, and 60 hours of video uploaded every minute. So you can see we're dealing with a ton of stories and storytellers. Now, with all this content being uploaded to YouTube every minute of every day, the corpus of YouTube is incredibly huge, and it's also amazingly diverse. Check this out. So this diagram shows a piece of a mapping of video topics on YouTube clustered by theme. It's created by one of YouTube's engineers. Now, the stereotype is that YouTube is all funny animal videos, and it is true, we do have a lot of those. But if we pan back, and it's so interesting, it actually looks like a brain. I usually call this the mind of YouTube. If we pan back to see the whole map, we also find music, comedy, news, sports, how-to videos, everything. So many subjects. Now, incidentally, when I was first looking at this visualization, I noticed the tiny little topic hanging out by itself. You see in the top left-hand corner? And I was like wondering, what the heck is that? And then we zoomed in. This is a true story. Found out it was Weird Al Yankovic. He is truly in a league of his own, even according to algorithms. I begged the engineer not to fix it because I just thought it was so beautiful. So we know it's big and complex and diverse, but how did it get to be so? And what lessons can we glean from that story and the story of all of these platform-driven technologies that are changing the world in more ways than we can even see and understand? Based on my experience, there are 3 things that they have in common. It's not just about changing the world through experience design. It's about changing the world through empowering, disruptive, and magical experience design. Now, these platforms of change empower the individual to understand and share his or her own story to an audience that could potentially be the entire world. With citizen reporting, we empower everyday people to provide eyewitness accounts of everything from Occupy protests to life and death moments and political rallies. With the It Gets Better campaign, we empower gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender adults to address the seriously high rate of suicide among young LGBT, to let them know through personal testimony that it really does get better. And we see independent musicians empowered to make and distribute their music on their own terms and attract massive followings without a record contract. This is my daughter, Isabelle. When this photo was taken, she was about 2 years old, attending a wonderful preschool in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it was called the Open Door School. And the teachers were very deliberate about how they introduced materials and process into the classroom. And at times, it didn't always make sense to us parents. For instance, for the first whole month of school in the two-year-old class, the only paint that they allowed the children to use was red. I'd get dozens and dozens of paintings sent home, all these big red blobs. It looked like a crime scene. And this photo was taken during that month. Now, the next month, the red paint went away, and it was replaced by blue. And all month long, the children squished it in their hands and rubbed it all over pages and often all over themselves, generating dozens and dozens of paintings. It was their blue period, if you will. And then one day, something really wonderful happened. The children came in, and they found not only the blue paint, but their old friend red. 2 colors. It was like the universe had shifted. And as Isabelle's teacher later told me, she walked up to the easel, she stuck one hand in red and one hand in blue, and then she rubbed her hands together, and then with an expression that kind of combined astonishment and deep pride, she gleefully asked, "How'd I do purple?" Now, what does this story have to do with changing the world? Well, the photo shows us the importance at the earliest stages of our lives of participating in creation and invention. Now, for a period of time, Isabelle truly believed that she had, in some sense, invented the color purple. And if the teacher had just told her that red and blue make purple, she wouldn't have had that rush of discovery and invention that connected her so closely to the results. And I can guarantee you she will never forget how the color purple is made. And the same is true for the people who participated in the making of Life in a Day. Their relationship to that film is completely different, more personal, more intimate than a film created by a single auteur. Even those of us who didn't actively submit to the project feel that sense of kinship because we see ourselves in the faces of those who did. With products like YouTube and Instagram and Etsy, we reconnect people with their innate creativity and creative voice that has sometimes been pounded out of them over the years by institutions like school and work. And the ultimate societal disruption is in helping people believe in themselves and their stories, and that their stories deserve to be told and heard. Which leads me to the next essential ingredient in a world-changing platform. Through widespread empowerment comes disruption. Now, in fact, all design is driven by disruption in small and big ways. That's part of why change aversion is such a big issue to contend with in design. We're disrupting the habits and patterns of users, and it's annoying to people, even when, in fact, the new design is better than the old one. But the kinds of disruptions I'm referring to in this context are those that challenge the status quo. They disrupt current models, be they social, political, commercial, and the power structures and the distribution chains that go along with them. Now, this is where you get a glimpse into my hidden agenda. I seem like this nice, easygoing person, but secretly, I'm a design anarchist, but don't tell anyone. Now, really disruptive models, they can spawn disruptions on top of the primary platform. YouTube's initial disruption was circumventing all the barriers and limitations of how people could access and share video across networks. It was a technical breakthrough that we now all take for granted, but it was only the tip of the iceberg in terms of YouTube's eventual impact on many, many corners of society. Because that initial disruption was taken by smart, enterprising, and empowered individuals and groups in their own areas of expertise and passion. We can see many areas of society where YouTube has disrupted the way that things are done. Here are just a few examples. In education, we see experiments like the Khan Academy, which is a collection of educational videos and curricula for various subjects like math and science. And it was started as a way for one man to help his 6th grade cousin in another state understand algebra lessons. But it became a phenomenon that's driving serious discussion about how teaching and school will evolve in the coming decades under the pressure of decreased budgets and a major teacher shortage. The premise is that the teacher's time is best spent working one-on-one with small groups of students for more customized instruction, and that some learning may be more effectively and efficiently done through video tutorials, where the student can work at their own pace and actually rewind their teacher until they get it right. Now, clearly, this tool doesn't address all of the challenges facing our school systems today, but it's really fascinating to see how it's disrupting the discourse around schools and education and technology. But my favorite part is what I heard from my own daughter's teacher in Palo Alto. Sure, he was using the videos to help the kids learn their math lessons, but his real goal was to get them to make their own instructional videos and engage them in the teaching process, knowing how powerfully that cements the learning of those lessons. Clearly, she has a teacher who gets how to empower his students to create positive disruptions. We also see a disruption in the way that news is collected, reported, and understood because of the work of empowered citizen journalists. In the Arab Spring, we saw everyday citizens report the events unfolding in the streets of their cities when professional journalists could not. Now, these videos from the field, captured mostly on personal mobile phones by everyday people, not only reshaped our understanding of world events, but changed the faces of governments as well. One of the most striking examples of how rapidly this disruption of news reporting is happening is comparing the coverage of the destruction of caused by Hurricane Katrina in 2005, which happened before YouTube and Facebook and Twitter existed or were widely used, and the coverage of the devastating flooding in Pakistan about 5 years later in 2010. I call it the tale of two floods. In Katrina, we had rampant misinformation and rumors that really made it difficult to tell just exactly what was going on in the Superdome and in the 9th Ward of New Orleans, because many journalists couldn't access the area, and the people living through it, they weren't yet empowered with technology and connected communities. And much of the reports that we had were either from press meetings that were away from the destruction or these heartbreaking aerial views. But where was the view from the ground? By contrast, just 5 years later, we saw a ton of footage pouring in from Pakistan and could see firsthand accounts of the destruction, and we could target assistance and rescue. What a difference 5 years and disruptive technology made in that case. Now, of course, the disruption of traditional media is probably the most visible example to date. TV used to be something that somebody else made and we consumed in linear fashion and when we were told to do so. But have you talked to a 5-year-old recently about how TV works? Their understanding is totally different. They assume everything is on demand, whenever and wherever they want, and for free. And these aren't things that they're surprised by or grateful for. They're just the facts and the expectation moving forward. And the disruption has reached its full effect when people start to take it for granted. Former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright tells a story of her young granddaughter who said, "Grammy, I don't understand why people make such a big deal about you being a woman Secretary of State. Secretary of States are always women." At 6 years old, women secretaries of state are all she's ever known. Disruption is a critical ingredient in the creation of a massively successful platform. Now, the last ingredient is my favorite. It's magic. Now, magic amplifies empowerment, and disruption to change the world. I have a friend named Seth Raphael. He's an MIT-trained magician. Seriously, I did not know that existed either before I met him. Now, Seth decided to combine his love of magic and technology because he believes that the best experiences with technology feel magical. I had Seth come to my birthday party because, well, it was my birthday party and I wanted a magician. And a dear friend of mine who is a talented engineer was sitting next to me as Seth performed one of his amazing tricks that he'll often do on a phone or a tablet, and using apps that he's either designed or hacked in some magical way. And when he completed the trick, I had this huge grin and expression of wonder on my face that was kind of like this. And my engineering friend next to me had this scowl on his face that was like, it drove him bonkers that he could not figure out how Seth had performed his trick. Now me, I couldn't figure it out at all, and I was so happy. I didn't want to know how it worked. I loved the sense of wonder that I felt, and knowing the mechanics of it would have totally destroyed the illusion. The fun was in the mystery and the possibility that maybe it really was magic and not just sleight of hand. Magic disrupts the notion of reality. It makes you see as possible something that you thought was impossible. Magic is what elevates technology to a great experience, and it elevates good design into great design. Magical experience design has many dimensions, and in our industry, it often starts with a technological breakthrough. Arthur C. Clarke, author of 2001: Space Odyssey, once famously said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." Being able to upload any kind of video file and have anyone be able to watch it through a browser, in 2005, that was magic, and it was called YouTube. But it goes well beyond that, especially in mature businesses and markets where the technology becomes a commodity and when people become entitled to the disruption. And that's where the other dimensions of magical experiences come in. Beauty, details, story, the feeling, the whole experience. Adding experience magic is sometimes hard because it can't always be explained or rationalized or measured or tested. And it can be hard to sell in contexts where data and logic are the ruling factors in decision making, because magic relies heavily on intuition. Intuition helps us understand why Instagram is so much more compelling than a phone's built-in camera app. The requirements and the technology are basically the same, but the experience, the magic of that experience is the difference. In addition to the utility of taking pictures, Instagram has these simple filters that empower your sense of creativity and make your photos that may be kind of just so-so more interesting and beautiful. And it combines it with this ease of sharing with a community that values your contribution. Your photos no longer just languish on your phone, never to be seen and shared by others. Your creative vision is liberated. And in the process, you feel more creative and connected with others. It's magic. It's not about the technology, or even what you think about the technology, or even what you feel about the technology. In the best scenarios, the magic is what you feel about yourself when you're using the technology. Instead of stupid or frustrated or powerless, magical experiences make you feel smart, creative, connected, empowered. Apple once added a handle to the top of the iMac that they were pretty sure nobody was going to use. But they knew it was a critical part of the experience narrative that they were crafting. People are in control of and empowered by technology and not the other way around. That's magic. A little blue moving dot representing you on a map on your mobile phone that can help someone like me who has absolutely no sense of direction understand not just what route I need to take, but indeed which direction I'm currently facing so that I don't start walking in the wrong direction like I usually do. It's called marrying the compass on my phone with Google Maps, and it's magic. It's the experience of flying Virgin America versus pretty much any other airline. I'm still essentially just boarding a plane and flying from San Francisco to New York, and at the same price point, but the experience is elevated by their service design. In fact, and perhaps not coincidentally, their frequent flyer program is called Elevate. The stylish interior, the delicious food on demand, and don't even get me started on their cheeky editorial voice and the video explaining airline safety. It's brilliant. You should look it up on YouTube. Make it an aviation experience that I actively look forward to. And that may actually be beyond magical and into the realm of miraculous. We know magic when we see it and feel it. Isaac Bertrand's concept for dragging files from phone to computer. A paintbrush that works on an iPad. And hello, the world's first 3D chocolate printer. What do all of these things have in common? There's like a user experience sleight of hand, if you will. You don't focus on the mechanics of how something works, the airplane engine, the interior contents of a CPU, the rendering of maps data, but the delight of the experience fueled by that technology. Now, a recent example of how magic has shaped the design of products that I've worked on is the recent redesign of YouTube. I had this big challenge when you're designing a platform for all of humanity to participate in. YouTube has a whole spectrum of creator types and of video quality and the emotional spectrum of the content that they create, from funny to devastating. How do you design a container that feels like an appropriate home for all of it? In late 2011, we launched a full visual redesign of YouTube. And when we started the project, we needed a metaphor to help explain what our goal was from an experience point of view. We knew we wanted to design a container that would hold all the world's video, but we didn't want to just hold it. We want to elevate it. We wanted to connect people with it. The metaphor that we used was plates. They're a container for content that we all use every day without thinking that much about it. But there are lots of different kinds of plates, and we have different relationships to them. All these plates can hold a meal. They all essentially serve the same function, but the experience of some of them is very different than others. Let's take a look at the two extremes of this plate spectrum. Paper plates, designed in a way that actively discourages attachment. No decoration, highly disposable. Feels right for a hamburger, but not so much for a holiday feast. At the other end, formal china, designed and culturally imbued with deep meaning and formality, handed down through generations, used only for special occasions, great for filet mignon, not so much for peanut butter and jelly. Diner plates, found throughout mid-priced roadside restaurants across America, fits a fairly wide range of meals, highly durable, ubiquitous, utilitarian, and kind of unremarkable. Thousands of manufacturers, and kind of hard to tell one from the other. Heath ceramics, lovely, handmade, stylish, with a sense of history, but a bit off-putting if you're not a modernist. And in the middle, Centuryware, based on a mid-century design by Eva Zeisel, a groundbreaking designer who worked right up until her passing away this past December at the age of 105. Now there is something about this plate. Not only does everything that you put on it look good, everything looks better. And there's something subtly unique about it. It's slightly off-white, it's not quite round, it's a little larger than you'd expect. And while it gently recedes into the background when a meal is presented, it has this beauty all its own. This plate is magic. We don't really know why, and we really don't care. That's what we wanted. We wanted a container that made all of the content look better. A container that welcomed not only high-end filmmakers, but also everyday people on the streets of Cairo. A container that would morph and stretch and feel like the right home for all of the video on planet Earth. A container that no one would really take notice of, except for the fact that they felt connected to it. And these other platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Etsy, they all have the same problem, the same opportunity. Because the moment that you get too fancy or too slick, too informal, too anything, you start to alienate someone in the creator community who feels it isn't the right place for them and their story. And you need to ask yourself, do I want to invite the whole world? And how might I do that and retain a strong sense of brand identity? It's hard to do, but when it works, it's magic. Now, when I look at the way the new visual design of the site elevates the videos made by our community, and I'm a big Muppets fan, I always use the Muppets example, it does feel a little bit magical. Everything looks a bit crisper, cleaner, and the focus is right where it should be, on the video. A simple example of how the magic is built into this new visual design language is there's a new gray background on the site. It has a big role to play in creating a canvas that makes the video jump right off the page. But there's something you may not know about it unless you look really, really closely. There's a very subtle texture to the gray. It's barely perceptible, but it's just enough to add warmth and uniqueness without calling too much attention to itself. A little bit of visual design sleight of hand, a little bit of magic. So what does this all mean for you? Many of you may work in contexts around projects that don't have the overthrow of governments or the reinvention of media as stated goals. But I believe there's still some powerful lessons that you can take home about empowerment, disruption, and magic to apply to your work. The first is don't get in the way of the magic. Sleight of hand tricks work because the audience is focused on the experience, the magician's story, and not on how he hides the scarf up of his sleeve. In the same way, product design should bring the magic to the forefront and the focus on the experience and not the technology that drives it in the background. Number two, there's deep value in things that you can't explain. When you work in an industry that's obsessed with technology and with numbers, sometimes you can convince yourself that the right answer can always be determined solely through logic. The fact is, there is incredible value in things that can't be explained and sometimes even seem irrational. Like the satisfaction of hearing a simulated shutter noise on a fully digital camera, or the way that the brushed aluminum casing on your laptop makes you want to hold and covet it as something special. And third, believe in people. They can be messy and confusing and emotional. But sometimes they do things with technology that we all wish that they wouldn't. But people yearn and deserve to be empowered, to affect positive change in their own lives and communities. And we as humanists and designers, we should embrace that as our goal. Long ago, I realized that you have to believe that men and women are inherently good to do this kind of work. Otherwise, why would you empower them with these tools? This is not a place for cynics. Now, some of you may be wondering, what the heck? She worked at YouTube. Where are all the funny videos? Maybe you were hoping to see a little honey badger, or some Charlie bit my finger, or maybe some Nyan cat. I know, you all secretly love that stuff, but as well-educated doctors of whatever, you can't admit it publicly. And you were hoping to start out this Kai with some good low-level humor as a guilty pleasure, admit it. Well, I love that stuff too, as you can see from my Nyan cat Halloween costume this past year. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I want to instead close on something that will instead hopefully uplift and inspire you. It's called the Johnny Cash Project. And it's a collaboration between the director Chris Milk and one of my esteemed colleagues at Google Creative Labs, Aaron Koblin. And also over 250,000 admirers of the Man in Black from over 172 countries. I couldn't think of a more appropriate example of empowering, disruptive, and magical experience design to share right here in Austin, Texas, one of the world capitals of great music. The video is about 5 minutes, so sit back and enjoy.
I was first shown the Johnny Cash Project through my mom. She knew I loved Johnny, she knew I loved drawing, so when I checked out the website, I was completely blown away. I got to see people's artwork flashing before my eyes, just different images, but always following this cohesive video storyline.
The whole video was full of hauntingly beautiful imagery and symbolism that worked absolutely perfectly with Johnny's song. The frames were somewhat randomly distributed, and you had a limited choice of tools and textures. So really your main focus was just in what you wanted to say.
It was like this organic thing that was always changing because people would be submitting, and you could see hundreds of variations of the same video. What better way to pay tribute to the man than to make something for one of his songs?
I felt really sad when he died, and I just thought it would be wonderful. It would be really nice to contribute something to his memory.
It really allows this last recording of his to be a living, breathing memorial. I am honored to have inadvertently made a contribution to something so magical.
For all of the frames to be drawn by fans, each individual frame, it's got a very powerful feeling to it.
It's just amazing to see so many Johnny Cash fans collaborate on some of his final work. The artists that contributed, I mean, I've seen everybody from Japan, Venezuela to the States, you know, to Knoxville, Tennessee.
As much as it's different from frame to frame, it really is personal.
Watching back the video of my frame, I could see me not understanding at the beginning of it, and I just worked through problems until my little wee battles that I was fighting within the picture all began to resolve themselves. You can actually see the point where I know what I'm doing when a light and a dark comes into it. And in a weird way, that's what I actually like about Johnny Cash's music as well. It's the sum total of his life, all the things that have happened, you know, the bad things, the good things, you're hearing a person's life.
His relationship with the master has helped me in my own personal spiritual struggle and journey through life.
I didn't know that I could connect to someone from such a different background as mine, and for it to mean quite as much as it does.
This project is such a great example of all the principles we've been talking about today: empowerment, disruption, magic, and this meta principle of humanism and empowering the creativity of others. Empowerment. Who tells the story of Johnny Cash's legacy and the impact on his fans? Whose story is worthy of inclusion? Who gets to be the creator? We all do. Disruption. Who makes music videos? Who shares and distributes them? Who owns the final expression? We all do. And magic. How can we bring together this massive community of geographically distributed fans to collaborate on something deeply meaningful and personal and also beautiful? Through the magic of advanced technology and a beautifully designed experience for the creators and the viewers, it makes everyone's micro-contribution flow into this cohesive whole that still retains the sense of the individual. The end result clearly goes beyond a collection of video frames stitched together. It's the ultimate example of the sum being greater than the parts, and that's magic. So think about it. Think about your own work and the projects and the products that you work on. How might you empower people to express themselves? How might you disrupt experiences that are ripe for innovation? And how might you create magic? And later today, take a look at the plate that you're served lunch on. What kind of job does it do as a platform for the meal you're about to eat? Does it compete with it? Does it elevate it? Does it define the experience? What kind of plate are you looking to design? And what tasty, magical meal do you want to serve up to the world? The sky's the limit, and the world is hungry for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, wonderful talk.
And the audience, you're still welcome to send us questions. The students will deliver them to us up here. So let's start with a nasty one. So in your talk, you avoided discussing sort of the dark side of video, the porn, the bullying, the privacy intrusion, the terrorism, and so on. Why?
Well, I actually didn't, because at the end, when I talked about believing in people, you have to acknowledge that when you empower people with technology, there are going to be people who do things that we don't want them to do, that are destructive to themselves and to society. But I truly believe, and if you believe in democracy, you believe that empowering everyone in the end is going to result in more benefit than it will in the negative. But you have to understand that and also take a lot of precautions and make sure that you kind of police what's going on with the technology. There's no doubt about that.
So there's a follow-up question to that, perhaps. So why do you not allow users to remove all the recommended videos from the homepage? All the popular trash videos?
Well, I think with YouTube, like any other site that has kind of personalization systems, the more that you use it and the more information you give, the better those recommendations become. In other words, the less we know about you, the less effective we're going to be in presenting content that you like. So I guess, not that this is a pitch to use YouTube more, but the more explicit signals that you provide, whether it's by subscribing to content or logging in so that we can have a sense of what you like and don't like, and even rating content, the better those recommendations will become. And the fact is I've kind of seen this myself. When you do engage more deeply, those recommendations actually become pretty relevant.
So maybe this person needs to stop watching so much trash to avoid the trash. Another sort of, still on this negative side.
We're getting those all out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. When a video finishes, the recommendations that you get below it end up being a huge time waster. How would YouTube be different without them? Could you scrap them?
No, it's an interesting question, right? Because a huge part of YouTube's success is in related videos. In fact, I have a bunch of several YouTube colleagues here, researchers, and we joke, we call it the YouTube dance, because when our users describe the way that the watch page is presented, they say, there's the video, and then there's this stuff. And we call it the YouTube dance that they do. It's kind of like this, and it's all of the stuff that's on the right-hand rail. It is an addictive experience because you may come just to watch one video, but we're exceptionally good at putting more content in front of you. So I guess the trick is either to only watch embedded videos where it's just a single video and you don't have that, or be prepared to have some restraint, or just build more time into your schedule, I guess. I don't know. Sorry that it's so addictive.
One of the questions we thought were really interesting was that in earlier times of history, our stories were often cast literally in stone. Yeah. Is it not unfortunate that nowadays our cultural memory is cast in YouTube? And what will remain after?
I think that's really interesting. I mean, I feel like cultural movements end up circling back on themselves. So YouTube is having a lot of impact on society because of the way that it's brought this diverse group of people to the creator context. But we've also seen it influence more traditional art as well. So, we had a relationship with the Guggenheim Museum to use YouTube to discover filmmaking artists, like people who are creating real works of art on YouTube. And obviously, that's, not everybody creating videos on YouTube would be worthy of the Guggenheim, to say the least. But I do think that there is this, I would hope, a virtuous cycle where new technologies and new ways of expressing yourself end up circling back and influencing. So it's not just about YouTube being the new record of culture, but with a more diverse group of creators, actually culture being a better reflection of humankind. I mean, the fact is, and I was an art history major for a while in my undergraduate years, the history of art is actually not a reflection of all humanity. It's very much dominated by certain sectors of society and certain kinds of people. And so we can look back in sentimentality, but the fact is, as women and people of color, they aren't very well represented in art history. And I would like to think that these new technologies, while they have their pluses and minuses, at a minimum are making sure that a much more diverse group of people get to participate in that marketplace of ideas.
And we saw a great example with the Johnny Cash project of a new kind of participation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this question is really, I think, a challenge to a lot of people in this room. Yeah. So we see now that a lot of video is used in education, for example, also in universities. So isn't this going to change our universities? Do you think there's a point to having a small little university out in the forest in Sweden when they can access content from the best researchers in the world? And so maybe we need to change the role of universities and other educational institutions.
I think it's a really interesting question, and I think the challenges that exist at different stages of education obviously are different. I think with younger kids, there's certain parts of math and reading that have to do with rote memorization and just actually understanding the mechanics of things, and video instruction is actually really effective in that context. I think that there, kind of later in your educational experience, you may have access to a much broader swath of educational materials by accessing things online. I think it would be a huge mistake to look at these things as substitutes for teachers. And I think there are some people who believe that. I'm not one of them. I would just like for the teachers to be able to use their time in the way that they think is the best use of their time. And I think working one-on-one or in small groups with students is, a good use of a teacher's time. But I do think at the university level, and the fact is it's really expensive accessing content. And if this can open up new doors for people, I think that's a net positive, although, there's often unintended consequences from new inventions. I mean, but I think back to, when Google Books first was created, and thinking about the students at universities who just didn't have large libraries, and the idea that they were able to access research material that they were never able to access before. And so, in some sense, when you're living in a context where you have access to most of what you need, sometimes the impact of these technologies isn't as apparent to you as when maybe you're studying in a place where you don't have access physically to all the books and research materials that you want. So I think it's hard to draw any generalizations about it.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I think this question really deserves some time. Do you think empowerment is dangerous without moderation? Especially where viewers mistake propaganda for valid news, and how do we deal with these kinds of examples?
Well, I think the Johnny Cash example is really interesting for that reason, because as you notice, the project didn't say, submit any video. Like the end product would have been a lot different. It was a constrained context to contribute. Twitter is a lot like that, right? It's very constrained, and yet it doesn't in any way tell you what you should say. And I think there's a real magic in figuring out what the balance is between those things. YouTube is much more on the end of totally open. You can pretty much, unless it's copyright infringing and isn't in violation of the community guidelines, upload whatever you want to say. And so I think, certainly in terms of things like propaganda, it's a little bit, sometimes easier to define, maybe what hate speech is or libel. You do get in some really interesting spaces. Again, I think that people are always going to use technology and media in ways that help them fulfill their goals. And some of those goals are additive to society and some are subtractive. It's very dangerous to try to build in limitations up front, because when you do, you're actually going to restrict some really inventive uses that are very positive for society, even though your intention is to keep kind of the bad stuff out. So I think the best you can do is kind of monitor and make sure that you're giving people, some perspective on, hopefully what content is good and, interesting to people that they know and maybe that they're like-minded with, and, make people, have people decide for themselves what they think. It's kind of, YouTube is a media meritocracy, right? Nobody focus groups what's popular on YouTube. And sometimes that can lead to a little bit of the lowest common denominator. But generally speaking, and a lot of research holds this up, the stuff that goes viral is usually positive-minded things. People don't like to spread bad news through social networks or negativity. And in fact, the New York Times did a study a few years ago where they researched the most shared articles through the NewYorkTimes.com. And by far, it was positive-minded things, a lot of stuff about scientific discovery. I mean, it was really actually quite heartening. They weren't sending around depressing stories about the economic turmoil or, some terrible accident that happened. And so there is this sense of people wanting to spread positive news.
So I think we're over time.
I think we can do a couple more. You speak faster afterwards.
Okay.
So there are some interesting ones. Okay, so there's a lot of questions where people want to use you as an oracle to tell us about the future.
Oh dear.
So what is the next step? So questions involve, what is the challenge we should take on with video, for example? What is inspiring you most out of all the human qualities you were talking about? What is the next disruption that you see, or another content type that beyond video?
Yeah.
So all these questions are to do with, where are we heading? What is the future?
Well, one of the challenges that arises when you create these technologies that create this huge spigot of content is discovery becomes this massive challenge. Like if I know what I'm looking for, YouTube, Google, like all these tools are extremely effective, right? You search for it, you find it. It's much more difficult when you kind of don't know what you want to watch because there's this sea of content and it's not very easy to kind of browse. You can't browse through 4 billion views a day, right? It's a lot of content. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about is the role that curators will play. Because I think of curation actually as a content type. So that's the meta story around, how do I as an individual with a point of view or interest or passion or expertise actually organize that content for other people. And I think you're going to see, not just at YouTube, but on a lot of sites, and I think Pinterest is a really interesting example of this, is collecting, organizing, and curating content as, something that the world needs to do for itself because we're producing content at an alarming rate, and algorithms are not going to be the total answer to that question. In part because most algorithms don't have a particularly good sense of humor. They don't necessarily know what good taste is, because humor and good taste are very individually indicated. You know, what I find funny is not necessarily what you find funny. And that is something that humans, as messy and emotional and complicated as they are actually much better at in most cases than machines.
Yeah. Should we move on to the last question?
Yes.
I think it's...
Sounds like you've been saving it.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Because I think a great part of your keynote was the aspect where people are feeling very inspired by your message about the magic and the disruption that we can bring to the world through this kind of technological magic. And there's also a lot of audience out there who are inspired by your example as a designer and a mother of 3. And Beatrice, who's 11 years old, you brought her along, and we've enjoyed her personality in front here. You know, what can we... there's people who are really hoping to get a chance to talk to you, and they're wondering when they can meet you on the red chair.
You know, I wish that I had thought about that beforehand, because I'm happy to go to the red chair, but I'm trying to think right off the top of my head what's going to be a good time. Can we figure that out and then announce it later?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, I would love to do that. I mean, I think, you know, I brought my daughter because, A, I think it would be fun. You know, she's probably the youngest attendee this year, I would imagine, right? But also, you know, I was so inspired by the stat of the number of women attending the conference, because having spent my whole you know, career in technology, I am very used to being the only woman in the room. And I think the stats around Kai are fantastic. I mean, you guys should really applaud yourselves for being a context where people of all different kinds of backgrounds feel welcome and to participate, right? This in and of itself is kind of a disruptive platform as a conference. So I think that's fantastic. And, you know, it starts so early. You know, we think about, oh, how do we, you know, encourage more women to go into technology and do, you know, technology or engineering related degrees. College is way too late to start. I mean, it's good to do it then, but it's got to start when you're 10 or 11. That's the time to interest girls in math and engineering and robotics and all that kind of stuff, because they're great at it. And at some point, unfortunately, the world starts to tell them that they're not, and we need to kind of stop that.
Let's change it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.